If I were to sit down and ask you what's the scariest entity you've ever seen in any type of analog horror, what would your answer be? Maybe it's Clyde from DOAI due to the extremely well done visuals and stories surrounding him, or the man in the suit due to his rapidly evolving nature and the unstoppable force he could become. Maybe it's even the pumpkin rabbit from the Walton Files for just, well, being the pumpkin rabbit. But for someone who, in all honesty, rarely gets scared so much that it lingers with me for hours, maybe days after viewing something, until a few months ago I wouldn't have had an answer for you. Sure, each of these entities are scary in their own right, but they've never stuck with me. However, that would all change once I got around to watching Vita Carnis. And there is an entity here that in the overall story plays a fairly small role, but terrifies me to my core. The entity I'm specifically talking about here is the Mimic. And the reason I find the Mimic to be so terrifying is due to the fact that it plays into every major fear I have, and the overall impact its existence has in the world of Vita Carnis. Now, for those of you who have no clue what I'm talking about or need a refresher, Vita Carnis is an analog horror series created by Darren Quilloy, first releasing 2 years ago with 7 videos describing each entity within the series, with some of them being passive for the most part, but the majority of them posing a major threat to human survival. With the 21 videos in the series primarily focused on humanity's attempts to understand and study these creatures to better combat and or protect themselves against them. And while there's a lot more to it, I only want to focus on 3 videos that prominently feature the Mimic. So without any further ado, let's jump into it. The first tape I want to talk about is the 4th episode in the series titled Living Meat Research Documentary 4. For some context, each of the documentaries up to this point hadn't been that scary. The closest we got was tape 3 when we learned about the meat snakes and their ability to infinitely grow and undergo mitosis. But tape 4 is instantly different, as while talking about the Mimic's anatomy and diet, they dropped this little nugget into the mix.
A mature mimic's diet is comprised entirely of human flesh.
Now, this is one of the most horrific lines ever said in this series, and it's not just because of the music being cut. No, because up to this point, and even past this point, every other creature has had another food source and is integrated into their ecosystems in a mostly beneficial way. The Mimic is the only creature that actively hunts humans. We are its food source. We know it, and the Mimic knows it better than we will ever know it, as Mimics are solely located in human populated areas and grow depending on their environment. At the start, Mimics look like small, malnourished humanoids scurrying around, only eating small animals and wildlife, but once they eat enough, they will begin metamorphosis, and once they do, they become adult Mimics, and they will instantly begin stalking and feeding upon humans, using clothes, mannequins, and furniture to blend into their environment as they learn their prey's routines before striking when it's defenseless, usually when asleep, where the Mimic can kill its prey instantly and begin consuming them before leaving the city or town and digesting its prey unbothered by anything else around it. If its prey is still awake, the Mimic will use sounds to corner a human for attempting an attack. And this is all pretty standard for analog horror. There's the typical horror scenes with loud sounds and glitches, we know what to expect. And then, once we've all calmed down and all the scary part is gone, it does this.
Once a human is in place, it will swiftly attack and kill the helpless target.
This scene, to me, is one of the most horrific pieces of analog media I've ever seen. This scene manages to scare me into tears, and there's still 2 other videos to go over. There's no music here to tell you how to feel, no dialogue exchanged, just a man who is fearful for his life, locking every door, knowing that won't be enough, and desperately hiding away in hopes the mimic passes them by. But inevitably, they're found. And it's bone chilling, dude. The next part of this tape talks about how the mimics can morph into 2 other forms. If a mimic has a consistent food source, it will begin to develop more humanoid features until it looks almost exactly like a human, allowing it to blend into human populations more efficiently and lure people more effectively, which is talked about more in the next video. The next form it can take is an elder mimic, where its teeth move to the back of its throat, its skin blackens, and its face is covered in a smooth skin. However, this doesn't come up again, so I'll move past it, but it is one of my favorite designs to come out of this series. The tape then ends with some brief instructions on how to defend yourself against a mimic, with the main points being to run, use weapons not to harm them but to defend yourself, and scream in the fetal position to alert others to the mimic threat, and to hide behind furniture and stay hidden from the mimic as it will not loiter for long. The tape then ends with the sounds of breathing and chewing from the footage earlier, with blood splattering the wall and door of the closet, with each bite getting wetter and softer before the tape ends. And I hope you can now begin to understand why I'm so afraid of these creatures. I've always been scared or anxious of small noises or those times when you think someone called your name only to turn around and call out to hear no answer. So it's no surprise the idea of an entity constantly stalking and watching me, waiting for a time to strike when I'm vulnerable, hits a nerve. But we have 2 more tapes to cover, so let's continue. The second tape to prominently feature mimics is the Mimic Defense Instructional Tape, which was a tape released globally discussing the growth of mimic populations and informing the general public on how to defend themselves against a mimic attack, where if we didn't already suspect the mimics to be intelligent, it's outright confirmed to us as they hide inside furniture within a human's home waiting for a chance to strike. The ones on screen include a walk-in wardrobe, an ottoman which is like these little storage benches, and the bottom side of a mattress, with a mimic being able to contort themselves to fit within these spaces despite their 7-foot heights. We're then shown 3 images of mimics pretending to be humans before we're shown much more disturbing versions, which in all honesty has to be the best executed version of this trope I've ever seen, outside the iconic William Afton melt of course. We're then told conflicting information to the first tape. We're told that if we find the mimic, we have to try and intimidate it, and if we have a weapon, to attack its legs and head. If a mimic hasn't discovered us yet, we need to stay where we are and call the authorities. If the mimic notices us and gives chase,
run.
The last piece of advice we're given is to hide away and stay quiet, just like our character did in the first tape. And this is another aspect that makes the mimics so haunting to me. While we now know some new information about them, there's so much more conflicting and potential misinformation surrounding them that even if all of these steps are followed, as we've seen from the last tape, the mimic will still find you. I also really like how, unlike most other analog horrors that pretty much tell you just to lay down and die, if this tape is believed, we might actually have a shot of beating these things. No matter how unlikely it is, as they could immediately kill us, the thought of something hiding within your own bed or couch you're currently sitting on is horrifying. And I found myself on occasion after watching these videos, just giving the furniture or the corners of my room, hell even my bed, quick glances just at the thought of a mimic and the ideas presented, because they have stuck with me for so long that it's created a situation where in my day-to-day life I will just look the slightest bit harder at the environment around me. And that's where the informative side of the tape ends, as we're then shown a confidential tape titled Christopher and Janice Case 1983, with instructions to destroy all copies of the tape. This is where we learn exactly what a mimic can do and how it hunts. The tape begins with 2 people just walking down the street in the dead of night, testing out a new video camera. Janice, the responsible one of the 2, starts questioning if they should even be out this late. Christopher, however, just brushes her off, and they keep walking for a bit before he realizes he forgot to stop recording and goes to turn the camera off. But seconds later, the camera just turns itself back on while Christopher discusses how the camera is weird and likes to randomly turn on and off. The camera then picks back up with our duo in a dark forest heading towards someone's house, presumably to investigate a mimic attack, as there's been a big local conspiracy surrounding the body of a victim. The camera then begins to slightly distort and glitch as we continue to get scenes of the two walking, with nothing but the sounds of foliage below them, the cameraman's breathing, and the wind at night, which all work together to create a sense of anxiety because we know the mimics attack quietly and when a victim is vulnerable, so seeing two people walking alone in the middle of a forest is a recipe for something to inevitably go horribly wrong. Our cameraman then takes shots looking into the forest, and bro, you gotta get checked for asthma, holy! Then, after stopping to check an old abandoned car, they finally get to a spot and begin reading a script, presumably for a project. And it's really hard to make out what they're saying, but here's what I heard. In the year 1986, a teenage boy was coming home to his trailer one night. Although when he arrived home, he found a grisly scene. His father he came home to was found dead. The grisly scene laid before him. The police were called and came to investigate. Strange thing though, they immediately closed everything off. No one was allowed near, only a few witnesses saw what truly happened there. For some reason, the police are acting very weirdly, trying to keep everyone away and telling little information. And when information was released to the public, they said it was a suicide. Although the trailer and most people who lived nearby all moved away almost instantly. The police said it was a suicide, but those who saw what happened said it was much too grisly to have been that, but the police haven't come out with anything yet. That's why I'm here, to answer what truly happened. And there's a lot we can learn from this. At this point in time, it would appear that mimics are being hidden from the public eye, and their attacks, while becoming more frequent, local governments are just refusing to say anything about them and are even releasing cover stories to hide what really happened. After then getting bullied by his friend for his use of grizzly, which is absolutely deserved, they begin heading back home. On their walk, however, Chris disappears.
Yeah, 'cause like back there was the perfect time for a serial killer to just jump out and grab us, you know?
Cut it out. It's scary enough as is. Chris? 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 Where are you? Chris! Come on! This isn't funny!
Janice continues walking back the way they came, calling for Chris the entire time before returning back to that old car.
Chris? What are you doing? Chris, this isn't funny.
She is then chased screaming for her life as the mimic tails close behind her, growling all the way as she returns home and closes the door behind her, but the mimic doesn't care, smashing through the door and chasing her throughout the house. And like, what am I even supposed to say to that? Just thinking about that happen is enough to scare me half to death. The idea that someone gets snatched like that so quietly is horrific enough, but the fact that she did everything correctly, she screamed, she yelled, she ran, and none of it worked. It's incredible work by Darian, and honestly, I cannot get enough of it. It's been a while since any type of horror media has left me speechless like this. I just genuinely don't know how to respond other than to move on to the final tape. The next time we learn anything about the mimics is in Vita Carnis Season 2 in a video titled Revealed Progress. The entire video is mainly used to set the record straight on what exactly these creatures are and what they can do. The part of the video I want to focus on is about 4 minutes 40 seconds into it, where Dr. Farron Bronze, a mimic expert, discusses his findings. And immediately, everything we knew about the mimics is thrown into question. The juveniles here are described as feisty, and as they get older, even before metamorphosizing, they get cocky, and it's implied they attempt to scare the researchers from their cages, with their killing techniques described as aiming for the neck to deliver a killing blow. We are then shown a mimic being cut open mid-metamorphosis, presumably dead, I hope, and I've gotta say, the prop work in this series is phenomenal. I haven't brought it up until now, but it is amazing how well drawn everything is and how well crafted the sets are, and the realistic versions of Darian's monsters are just fantastic, and it really helps add to the scare factor just by how realistic everything is. Moving on, we learned that mimics metamorphosized in a controlled environment don't last long. However, those ones caught in the wild are another story. They're a lot more active and last a lot longer due to the humans they already ate.
Already having food and nutrients in their systems. It's not something I dwell on too often. I am thankful for the ones they bring in for me. I got several adults, even a few humanoid ones.
We then get confirmation of what we already knew. The mimics prefer to hide in furniture, and the mimics were previously called butchers, but that got changed to mimics because of D&D, baby! The research, however, highlights how their hunting tactics are a lot more complicated than they first seem.
All depictions of their patterns have been wrong in one way or another. Ever since that public announcement in '86, they keep changing it. In reality, it is almost completely random. Each case in the wild is different and it's hard to determine why in captivity. Plus, human testing is a no-go. Even though I volunteered myself, I feel so close to figuring it out. Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. The next stages are even harder to... Wait, how long do these tapes have to be?
And if that's not scary enough, we now learned their patterns are completely random, and the elder mimics, which I didn't even fully mention earlier, hunt completely differently alongside being bulletproof. There's still a lot more to be discovered about mimics and vita carnis, and I hope we do learn a lot more because they are a fascinating species to me despite being so terrifying. Currently, however, it feels like this series, or at least season 2, is nearing its end, but I really hope we get to learn more about the mimics before the series ends. The sense of hopelessness and dread these creatures bring every time they're on screen is haunting. All props to Darian for creating such an interesting and bone-chilling entity, and being able to restrain himself from overusing it, knowing that when they are utilized, it's a spectacle. And the fact that the mimics' patterns are so random and the public has been led to believe misinformation in an attempt to stop mass hysteria, which only leads to more gruesome deaths, is horrific. Every time I think about this series and the mimics, they cause me to be on edge just because of how terrifying being put against a mimic would actually be. Even while writing this script, I've had goosebumps on and off, and my heart rate has been a mess when I've been rewatching these videos. But hopefully I've convinced at least one of you to go and watch Vita Carnis, and hopefully more of you now understand the true terror behind the mimic. I've been Core, thank you for all the support in my last video, and I'll see you whatever I make next. Bye bye, and make sure to check your furniture. You never know what could be hiding inside.